Welcome to Dark Hours. We're diving into another episode of true trucker horror stories, where the roads twist wrong and the night never ends. Before we roll out, hit subscribe so you never face the dark alone, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from tonight? Let's begin. I haven't slept right in 4 years. Every time I close my eyes, I see that stretch of highway, that impossible mile marker, and I hear the sound of my own voice coming through the CB radio telling me to turn around. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been driving trucks for 19 years, hauling everything from produce to electronics across 48 states, logging more miles than most people will ever travel in their entire lives. I've seen every kind of road condition, every type of weather, driven through blizzards in Montana and dust storms in Nevada, and I always thought I understood the highway, thought I knew every trick and danger it could throw at me. But there are some roads that don't follow the rules. We think we know. Some stretches of asphalt that exist in places they shouldn't. And once you find yourself on one of those roads, there's no guarantee you'll ever really leave it behind. It happened on a run from Tulsa to Sacramento, a route I'd driven dozens of times before, straight shot mostly on I-40 through the high desert. I'd picked up the load late in the afternoon, 40,000 pounds of industrial equipment. Metal parts for some manufacturing plant out west, the kind of cargo that's heavy but easy. No special handling required, no refrigeration, no hazmat paperwork, just secure it properly and drive. I left the shipping yard around 6. In the evening, later than I'd wanted, but still plenty of time to make decent progress before my mandatory rest period. The sun was setting as I merged onto the interstate, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of orange and purple that bled into each other like a bruise forming in slow motion. The CB radio was quiet except for occasional chatter from other drivers reporting their positions, complaining about construction near Amarillo, warning about a smoky running radar near the state line. Standard road talk. The kind of background noise that becomes almost comforting when you spend as many hours alone as I do. The first few hours were completely normal. I made good time through the Oklahoma Panhandle, crossed into Texas just before 9, stopped for fuel, and a quick meal at a truck stop outside Shamrock where I knew the coffee was decent and the restrooms were clean. I talked briefly with another driver in the lot, an older guy named Ray, who I'd crossed paths with a few times over the years, and he mentioned that the weather forecast was calling for possible fog later that night further west, told me to keep my eyes sharp if I was planning to push through. I thanked him, topped off my coffee, and got back on the road, planning to drive until around 2 in the morning before finding a rest area to grab my mandatory break. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark, my headlights cutting through the blackness like a tunnel through nothing, and the white dashed lines in the center of the road became hypnotic in their endless repetition, appearing out of the darkness and disappearing beneath my truck in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Around midnight, somewhere west of Amarillo, the fog Ray had warned me about started rolling in, thick and gray and moving across the highway in waves that seemed to have their own intention, their own purpose. I slowed down, dropped my speed to 45, turned on my fog lights and my flashers, the way you're supposed to, the way I'd done 100 times before in bad weather. The CB radio crackled with a few other drivers reporting the same conditions. Voices sounding distant and slightly distorted through the static, which I attributed to the weather interfering with the signal. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, then 30, then less, until I was essentially driving blind, trusting the feel of the road beneath my wheels and the faint glow of the lane markers more than anything I could actually see. I considered pulling over, waiting it out at a rest area, but I was in that stretch of highway where the exits are few and far between, and I just passed the last one about 20 miles back, so I kept going, kept my hand steady on the wheel, kept my eyes focused on the small circle of road my lights revealed. That's when I saw the mile marker. Mile 112, it read, the green sign emerging from the fog on the right side of the road, reflective numbers glowing in my headlights. Nothing unusual about it. Mile markers are everywhere. I'd passed thousands of them. They're just tools for navigation, for knowing where you are, for emergency services to locate you if something goes wrong. But something about this one felt wrong, felt off in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. I'd been on this stretch of I-40 enough times to have a general sense of where I was, and mile marker 112 should have put me somewhere around Groom, but the fog was so thick I couldn't see any of the usual landmarks, couldn't see the water tower or the grain elevators or any of the distant lights that usually marked civilization. I checked my GPS, and that's when I noticed the first real problem. The screen was showing my location, a blue dot on a gray line representing the highway, but the mile marker number on the GPS read 147, not 112. A 35-mile difference, which didn't make any sense, which couldn't be right because GPS might lose signal sometimes, but it doesn't just invent locations that are miles away from where you actually are. I tapped the GPS screen, thinking maybe it needed to recalibrate, thinking maybe the weather was interfering with the satellite signal, but it just kept showing mile 147, showing me 35 miles further down the road than the physical sign I'd just passed said I was. I grabbed my CB radio mic and clicked it on, intending to ask if anyone else was seeing anything weird, if anyone else was experiencing GPS problems in this fog. But before I could speak, I heard my own voice come through the speaker. Not someone who sounded like me, not a similar voice, but my actual voice, my exact inflection and tone, saying, "Turn around, Marcus. You need to turn around right now." I dropped the mic like it had burned me, feeling my heart start to hammer in my chest, feeling a cold sweat break out across my back despite the warmth of the truck's cabin. I stared at the CB radio, watching the channel indicator, seeing it light up as the transmission continued, as my own voice kept talking, saying, "This isn't the right road. This isn't where you're supposed to be. Turn around before you reach mile 100. I switched the CB off completely, cutting off the sound of my own voice mid-sentence, and the sudden silence in the cab was overwhelming, oppressive, broken only by the rumble of my engine and the hiss of my tires on the wet pavement. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my breath coming faster than it should, and I tried to rationalize what I'd just heard, tried to find a logical explanation for my own voice coming through the CB radio, giving me warnings I hadn't spoken. Cross signals, I told myself, some kind of weird feedback loop, someone playing a recording, someone pranking truckers by playing back their previous transmissions. But I hadn't transmitted anything. Hadn't spoken on the CB since leaving the truck stop hours earlier, and even if someone was playing games, how would they know my name? How would they know exactly where I was and what I was seeing? I kept driving, because I didn't know what else to do, because stopping on the highway in heavy fog seemed more dangerous than continuing forward, and because some part of me, the rational part that had been driving trucks for almost 2 decades, refused to believe that anything truly impossible was happening. Fog plays tricks on your mind. Exhaustion can make you hear things. Stress can create false memories. And I'd been on the road for 6 hours straight, without a real break, so maybe I was just tired. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then I passed another mile marker, mile 108, and my GPS still showed 147, and the fog got thicker somehow. Got so dense that it seemed to have texture, seemed to press against the windshield like something alive and aware. The highway felt different too, felt wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. The pavement beneath my tires sounding different, the angle of the road feeling slightly off, as if I'd drifted onto some alternate version of I-40 that existed parallel to the real one, but didn't quite match it in dimension or direction. Mile marker 104 appeared out of the fog, and then 100, and I remembered the voice on the CB radio, my own voice warning me about reaching mile 100, telling me to turn around before I got there. I'd already passed it. I was already beyond the point where I'd been warned to stop, and nothing had happened. No disaster, no collision, no sudden catastrophe. Just more fog and more highway, and the growing sense that I was driving deeper into something I didn't understand and couldn't escape. I tried turning on the CB radio again, keeping the volume low, listening for other voices, for any sign that there were other drivers out there, other people experiencing the same conditions, but the speaker only produced static, a hissing, crackling noise that almost sounded like whispering if you listened long enough, like dozens of voices all talking at once just below the threshold of comprehension. Mile marker 96, mile 92, mile 88. The numbers counting down instead of up, running backward like I was traveling in reverse even though my speedometer showed I was moving forward at 45 miles per hour, even though I could feel the truck's momentum carrying me west, could feel the subtle pull of gravity on my cargo as the highway rose and fell in its endless undulations. My GPS had stopped updating entirely, the screen frozen on mile 147, the blue dot representing my location sitting motionless on the digital map while the real world around me continued to change, continued to scroll past my windows in shades of gray and black and that thick, impenetrable fog. I looked at my fuel gauge and saw that it showed 3/4 full, which was wrong. which was impossible because I'd been driving for hours and should have burned through at least a quarter tank by now, and the clock on my dashboard was stuck at 12:47 a.m., the digital numbers frozen mid-minute, not advancing to 12:48 no matter how long I watched. That's when I started seeing things in the fog, not clearly, not distinctly, but shapes that moved alongside the highway, tall and thin and wrong in their proportions, keeping pace with my truck despite my speed, staying just at the edge of my vision where I couldn't focus on them directly. When I turned my head to look straight at them, they would vanish, melting back into the gray void, but in my peripheral vision they were always there, always watching, always moving, with that strange, jerking gait that didn't match any living thing I'd ever seen. The white, dashed lines in the center of the road started to look different too, started to look less like paint on asphalt, and more like teeth. Like an endless row of jagged white teeth stretching out ahead of me, and the dark pavement between them looked like a throat, like I was driving down the gullet of some massive thing that was slowly swallowing me. Mile marker 84, mile 80, mile 76. I'd been driving for what felt like hours since entering the fog, but according to my frozen clock, no time had passed at all, and according to the mile markers, I was traveling backward through space, retreating into some earlier version of the highway that existed before I'd arrived, or maybe after I'd already passed through and ceased to exist. I tried to find an exit, scanning the right side of the road for any sign of an off-ramp, any indication that I could leave this highway and find my way back to normal roads, normal reality. But there were no exits, no rest areas, no emergency pull-offs, just the endless repetition of fog and pavement and those things moving in the gray void outside my windows. I don't know when I started crying, when the fear finally broke through my denial and my training and my stubborn refusal to accept that something impossible was happening, but I remember feeling tears running down my face. Remember feeling my chest constricting with panic. Remember thinking about my wife Sarah and my daughter Emma and wondering if I would ever see them again. If I would just keep driving backward through these mile markers until I reached zero, or until I ran out of road, or until something in the fog finally decided to step out where I could see it clearly. I thought about stopping, about just pulling over and turning off the engine and waiting for whatever was going to happen, but I was too afraid to stop, too afraid that sitting still would be worse than continuing forward, so I kept my foot on the accelerator and kept driving through the fog that never cleared and past the mile markers that never stopped counting down. Mile marker 72, mile 68, mile 64, and then, without any transition, without any sense of movement or change, the fog was gone. Just gone, completely vanished like it had never existed, and I was driving on clear highway under a star-filled sky, and the mile markers were counting up again like normal, and my GPS was working, showing me exactly where I was supposed to be, 40 miles west of Amarillo, right on schedule, right on track. My clock read 2:15 a.m., and my fuel gauge showed a quarter tank, and everything was normal, everything was fine, except for the fact that I'd just lost nearly 2 hours that I couldn't account for. 2 hours that had passed, while I drove through that fog and watched the mile markers count backward and heard my own voice on the CB radio warning me about things I didn't understand. I pulled over at the next rest area and sat in my truck shaking for 20 minutes before I could calm down enough to walk to the restroom. I splashed water on my face, stared at my reflection in the mirror, and saw a man who looked 10 years older than he had that morning, saw gray in my hair that I was certain hadn't been there before, saw lines around my eyes that seemed deeper, more pronounced. When I got back to my truck, I checked the CB radio, cycled through all the channels, listened to normal trucker chatter, weather reports, traffic updates, everything sounding exactly the way it should. I almost convinced myself it had been a hallucination, that I'd fallen asleep at the wheel for a few minutes and dreamed the whole thing, that the fog had been real, but everything else had been my exhausted mind playing tricks. But when I looked at my logbook, at the record I'm required by law to keep of my driving hours and rest periods, I found a gap, a stretch of 2 hours where nothing was recorded, where my pen had stopped writing even though I have no memory of putting it down. And when I checked the photos on my phone, the ones I'd taken at the truck stop before entering the fog, they were all corrupted, all showing nothing but gray static, even though I could see the thumbnails clearly before I opened them, could see my own face in the parking lot, could see the lights of the truck stop behind me. The images were there but inaccessible, replaced by something that looked like the fog I'd driven through, like that gray void had somehow reached into my phone and erased the evidence that I'd existed before entering it. I finished my delivery to Sacramento 3 days later, running behind schedule, making excuses about weather delays and mechanical issues that seemed more believable than the truth. I took a different route home, avoiding I-40 entirely, adding 8 hours to my drive time just to stay away from that stretch of highway. And for a while, I thought I'd escaped it, thought whatever had happened was over and done with. Just a strange story I would never tell anyone because they'd think I was crazy or lying or suffering from some kind of breakdown. But 3 months later, on a completely different route, hauling lumber from Oregon to Phoenix, I saw another mile marker that didn't match my GPS, saw the numbers counting in the wrong direction, felt that familiar sensation of wrongness settling over the highway like a storm moving in. The fog hasn't come back yet, but I know it will. I know that whatever I drove into that night is still out there, still waiting on some stretch of road I haven't found yet, or maybe on roads I drive every day but only appear at certain times, under certain conditions, when the barrier between where we are and where we shouldn't be gets thin enough to slip through. I carry a camera now mounted on my dashboard, recording everything I see, and every few weeks I review the footage, looking for signs, looking for answers, and sometimes I see things in the background of my recordings that I didn't notice while driving, shadows that move wrong, shapes in the distance that resemble those things I saw in the fog, mile markers that appear in the video but weren't there when I drove past. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm still driving trucks, still hauling loads across America, still spending more time on highways than anywhere else. But I don't sleep in my cab anymore, can't stand to close my eyes when I'm parked on the side of any road, and I keep the CB radio on all the time now, listening for that voice, for my own voice coming back to warn me or maybe to tell me that it's finally time to stop running, time to accept that some roads go places you can never really return from, and I've already been to one of those places even if I don't fully understand where it was or what it wanted from me. Every mile marker I pass now feels like a countdown, like I'm driving towards some final number that's waiting for me somewhere ahead. And when I reach it, I'll understand everything, and I'll wish I'd never understood anything at all. The last time I talked to Sarah, she asked me when I was going to quit, when I was going to find a job that kept me home, kept me safe, kept me away from the highways that seem to be changing me in ways she can notice, but I can't quite see. I told her soon, told her just a few more runs, told her I needed to figure some things out first. But the truth is, I don't know if I can quit, because every time I try to imagine doing something else, working somewhere else, I hear that voice on the CB radio, my voice, telling me that I'm already where I'm supposed to be, already on the road I'm meant to travel, and the only thing left to do is keep driving until I find out where it ends. Sometimes I wonder if I'm already dead, if I actually crashed that night in the fog and everything since then has been some kind of afterlife, some purgatory where truckers drive forever through endless darkness, passing the same mile markers over and over, never arriving, never truly moving forward. But then I feel pain when I stub my toe, taste food when I eat, smell diesel and asphalt and coffee, and I think, no, this is real. This is still my life, I'm still here. And then I see another impossible mile marker, another stretch of highway that doesn't match my maps, another sign that reality isn't as solid as I thought it was, and I'm not sure of anything anymore, except that the road goes on forever, and I'm still driving, and somewhere ahead of me or behind me or maybe right beside me in some dimension I can't quite perceive, that fog is waiting to swallow me again. I haven't told this story to anyone before now, haven't admitted out loud what I experienced that night or what I continue to experience in smaller ways every time I drive. But it's getting worse. The incidents are becoming more frequent, and I needed to write this down, needed to leave some record of what's happening before I reach whatever destination the highway has chosen for me, before I pass a mile marker that doesn't exist and this time I don't come back from it. If you're reading this, if you're a trucker or just someone who drives long distances late at night, pay attention to the mile markers, make sure they match your GPS, make sure the numbers are going in the right direction. And if you ever find yourself in fog that feels too thick, too alive, too intentional, turn around immediately no matter what, even if it means driving the wrong way, even if it means abandoning your load, because some roads aren't meant to be traveled and some destinations aren't meant to be reached. I'm about to start another run, Sacramento to Miami, 3,000 miles of highway ahead of me, and I don't know if I'll finish it. Don't know if this is the trip where I finally disappear completely into whatever exists between the mile markers that don't add up. But I'm going anyway, because that's what truckers do. We drive, we keep moving, and maybe that's all we've ever been doing, just moving through spaces that were never really there, counting down miles that lead nowhere at all. The thing about voices is that you learn to recognize them, even when they're saying things that make no sense, even when they're telling you to do things that break every safety rule and every regulation and every instinct that's kept you alive on the road. My name is Teresa Hammond, and I've been a long-haul trucker for 12 years, working as an independent contractor, taking jobs from various shipping companies, hauling whatever cargo pays the best rates. And I've always prided myself on being professional, reliable, someone who follows procedures and maintains her equipment and never takes unnecessary risks. I'm 41 years old. I live alone in a small apartment in Memphis that I'm barely ever in. And for most of my adult life, the highway has been more home to me than any building with walls and a roof. I thought I understood this job, thought I knew all the variables and dangers, thought I'd seen every kind of situation a driver could encounter, from mechanical failures to bad weather to aggressive drivers to cops running revenue traps. But I'd never experienced a dispatch call from a number that doesn't exist, giving me instructions to pick up a load that was never registered, delivering cargo to a location that isn't on any map. It started 4 months ago on a Wednesday evening in late July. I'd just finished a delivery in Atlanta, dropped a load of furniture at a warehouse on the south side, and I was heading to a truck stop to grab dinner and wait for my next assignment. The company I was contracting with that month usually sent new jobs through their app. A notification would pop up on my phone with pickup details, delivery details, the weight and nature of the cargo, the rate they were offering, and I could accept or decline based on whether the job fit my schedule and my route preferences. I was sitting in a booth at the truck stop, eating a chicken sandwich and scrolling through social media on my phone, when I got a call instead of an app notification. The number showed up as unknown, no caller ID, which was unusual but not completely unprecedented. Sometimes dispatch would call from a different line if there were special instructions or complications with a load. I answered and heard a woman's voice, calm and professional, identifying herself as dispatch and telling me she had an urgent pickup for me, good money, time-sensitive delivery, and she needed to know if I could take it right away. I asked her why this wasn't coming through the app, why she was calling from an unknown number, and she said there had been some kind of technical issue with the system, said they were working on it, but in the meantime, they needed to handle assignments manually over the phone. It sounded plausible enough. Technology fails all the time, and I'd had app issues before where I'd had to coordinate with dispatch through phone calls, so I said, "Okay, tell me about the load." She gave me an address in Atlanta, a warehouse about 40 minutes from where I was, said the cargo was already palletized and ready to load. 20,000 pounds of industrial parts, delivery destination in Nashville, standard rate plus a rush bonus that came out to almost twice what I'd normally make for that route. I should have questioned it more, should have asked more specific questions, should have verified the information independently, but the money was good and I had nothing else lined up, and Nashville was on my way back toward Memphis anyway, so I said yes, I'll take it, and she gave me the warehouse address and a loading dock number and a reference code to give to the workers there. She told me the pickup window was 10 p.m. to midnight, told me the delivery in Nashville needed to be completed by 8 a.m. the following morning, and then she thanked me and ended the call before I could ask anything else. I finished my dinner, plugged the warehouse address into my GPS, and started driving toward the pickup location, feeling a little bit of excitement about the unexpected job, about the extra money, about having a purpose for the evening instead of just sitting around waiting. The warehouse was in an industrial area I'd never been to before, down near the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, surrounded by similar buildings, distribution centers, and storage facilities that all looked identical in the dark. My GPS led me to the address without any problems, and I pulled into the lot around 9:30, half an hour early, and parked near the loading dock area, where a few other trucks were already waiting. The warehouse itself was a massive concrete structure with very few windows, floodlights illuminating the exterior, and several bay doors that were closed except for one on the far end that was partially open, light spilling out into the parking lot. I sat in my truck for a while, waiting for 10 o'clock, scrolling through my phone again, and I noticed that I didn't have any record of the call from dispatch, no number in my recent calls list, no duration, no indication that the conversation had ever happened, even though I distinctly remembered answering the phone and talking to the woman. That should have been my first real warning, my first indication that something was fundamentally wrong, but I convinced myself that maybe the unknown number had somehow glitched my phone's call log, maybe there was some technical explanation I didn't understand, and anyway, I was already here, already committed to the pickup, and it seemed ridiculous to just leave without at least checking to see if the load was real. At 10 o'clock, I got out of my truck and walked to the loading dock, climbed the stairs to the platform level, and approached the open bay door where I could hear machinery running inside, forklifts moving, the normal sounds of warehouse operations. A man appeared in the doorway, mid-50s, wearing a yellow safety vest and work gloves, and he asked me if I was the pickup for Nashville, and I said yes, gave him the reference code the woman on the phone had told me, and he nodded and told me to back my truck up to Bay 6. The loading process was completely standard, completely normal. 3 workers with forklifts moving pallets wrapped in black plastic shrink wrap into my trailer, each pallet marked with labels I couldn't quite read in the dim lighting but which looked official enough. It took about 45 minutes to load everything, and then one of the workers brought me a tablet to sign electronically, confirming I'd received the cargo and accepting responsibility for its transport. The paperwork on the tablet looked legitimate, bill of lading with all the standard information, weight, value, contents listed as industrial machinery parts, destination address in Nashville that I recognized as being in a commercial district near the airport. I signed with my finger on the screen. The worker took the tablet back, and then I was pulling out of the lot and heading north on I-75 toward Tennessee, feeling that familiar satisfaction of having a loaded trailer, having a job to do, having a destination, and a deadline. The drive was uneventful for the first hour. I made good time through the northern Atlanta suburbs, passed through Cartersville and Dalton, crossed into Tennessee just after midnight, the highway mostly empty except for other trucks and the occasional late-night car. My CB radio was quiet, just sporadic chatter from drivers reporting their positions or asking about road conditions ahead, and I had music playing softly through my stereo. Some classic rock station I'd found that was coming in clear despite being far from any major city. I felt good, felt normal, felt like this was just another night of driving, another load, another few hundred miles of pavement passing beneath my wheels. But then my phone rang again, same unknown number, and when I answered I heard the same woman's voice from before, the one who'd called me about the pickup, only this time she sounded different, sounded strange, like she was talking through water or from very far away, even though the connection was clear with no static. She said my name, said, "Teresa, you need to pull over immediately," and there was something in her tone that made my blood go cold, something urgent and afraid that didn't match the calm professionalism from the earlier call. I asked her what was wrong, if there was a problem with the load, and she said, "You shouldn't have taken this job. You shouldn't have picked up that cargo. You need to abandon the trailer right now and drive away as fast as you can." I laughed, thought she was joking or confused, told her I couldn't just abandon a loaded trailer on the side of the highway, told her I'd already signed for the cargo and I was responsible for delivering it. She said, "It's not real cargo, Teresa. It's not industrial parts. You need to stop the truck and look in the trailer and see what you're actually carrying, and then you need to leave it behind before it's too late." The call ended abruptly, line going dead, and I was left holding my phone and staring at the dark highway ahead of me and feeling my heart starting to race in my chest. Every rational part of my mind told me this was ridiculous, told me the cargo was exactly what the paperwork said it was, told me someone was playing a prank or I'd somehow gotten involved in something confused or mistaken. But another part of me, a deeper part that operated on instinct and intuition, felt genuine fear, felt the wrongness of the situation settling over me like a weight. I drove for another 10 miles, arguing with myself, trying to decide what to do, and finally I took an exit, pulled into a closed gas station, and parked in the empty lot with my engine idling and my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I got out of the truck, walked around to the back of the trailer, and stood there looking at the doors, at the security seal that the warehouse workers had attached, at the metal handle that would open it. I'd opened my trailer countless times before, checking cargo, verifying loads, making sure everything was properly secured, and it had never felt like this. Had never felt like I was about to open a door into something wrong, something dangerous, something that shouldn't exist. I broke the security seal, the plastic tag snapping with a sharp crack that sounded too loud in the quiet night, and I turned the handle and pulled the door open, the hinges creaking, the interior of the trailer dark except for what my phone's flashlight could illuminate. The pallets were still there, still wrapped in black plastic, still arranged exactly as they'd been loaded, but something about them looked different, looked wrong in ways I struggled to identify. The shrink wrap seemed to be moving slightly, pulsing, like there was something underneath breathing or shifting its weight. I climbed up into the trailer, my footsteps echoing on the metal floor, and I approached the nearest pallet, reached out with one hand to touch the plastic wrap, and felt warmth. Felt actual body heat radiating through the material, like whatever was inside was alive and had its own temperature. I pulled back, stumbled away, nearly fell getting out of the trailer, and I stood in the parking lot breathing hard and trying not to panic, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, who I was supposed to call, how I was supposed to explain this to anyone who would believe me. That's when I noticed the truck, another 18-wheeler parked about 50 yards away in the shadows at the edge of the lot, its lights off, its engine silent, but I could see someone in the cab, a figure sitting behind the wheel, watching me. I hadn't seen it when I pulled in, hadn't heard it arrive, but it was definitely there now, and something about the way it sat there, motionless and dark and observing, filled me with more fear than the warm pallets in my trailer. I got back in my truck, locked the doors, and pulled out of the parking lot as fast as I could without jackknifing my trailer, accelerating back onto the highway, heading north because I didn't know what else to do. Didn't know where else to go except the delivery address in Nashville, because maybe whoever was expecting this cargo could explain what it was, could tell me why it felt alive, could help me understand what I'd gotten involved in. The dark truck followed me. I watched it in my mirrors, maintaining a consistent distance behind me. Never getting closer, but never falling back, its headlights off, so it was just a dark shape visible mostly by the way it blocked out stars, by the way it created a moving void in the night behind me. I tried calling 911, tried calling the shipping company I contracted with, tried calling the warehouse in Atlanta, but every call immediately went to dead air, to nothing, like my phone was working but couldn't connect to anything outside my immediate bubble of reality. The CB radio was still functioning, but when I tried to transmit, asking if anyone could hear me, asking for help, the only response was silence, not even static, just absolute emptiness, like I was the only person left on the frequency. Mile markers passed, exit signs appeared and disappeared, the highway rolling through the Tennessee darkness, and I kept driving because stopping seemed more dangerous than continuing forward, because the delivery address was still my only destination, my only goal, the only thing that gave me any sense of purpose or direction. My fuel gauge started acting strangely, the needle rising and falling randomly, showing full then empty, then 3/4 then nothing, and my speedometer began displaying speeds that didn't match the feel of the truck, showing 80 miles per hour when I was barely doing 50, showing 30 when I knew I was going faster. Time became unreliable too, my clock jumping forward then backward, the digital numbers scrambling and rearranging themselves, and I couldn't tell anymore if I'd been driving for 1 hour or 5 hours, or if time had any meaning at all in the space I'd entered. The exit for Nashville finally appeared, the sign illuminated in my headlights, and I took it, descended the off-ramp into surface streets, followed my GPS instructions through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past buildings that looked abandoned but had lights and windows, past intersections where traffic signals cycled through colors that weren't quite red or green or yellow, but something in between. The delivery address led me to an industrial park, to a warehouse that looked exactly like the one in Atlanta where I'd picked up the load, same concrete structure, same floodlights, same bay doors, and I had the terrible realization that I might have driven in a circle somehow, might have ended up back where I started despite hours of traveling north. But this wasn't Atlanta. I could see Nashville's downtown skyline in the distance, could see the AT&T building, the Batman building as locals called it, so I was in the right city, I was where I was supposed to be. And now I just had to deliver this cargo and be done with it and try to forget this whole nightmare ever happened. I backed up to the loading dock indicated in my delivery instructions, Bay 3, and I sat there with my engine running, waiting for someone to come out, waiting for workers to start unloading, waiting for any sign that this place was staffed and operational. The dark truck that had been following me pulled into the lot and parked on the opposite side, its presence making it impossible for me to just leave, making me feel trapped, cornered, forced to go through with this delivery even though every instinct was screaming at me to run. A bay door opened, and a woman walked out onto the loading dock platform, and I recognized her immediately, even though I'd never seen her before. It was the voice from the phone calls. I knew it instinctively. Knew it in the same way you know someone's face matches their voice even if you've only heard them speak. She was young, maybe late 20s, wearing jeans and a dark jacket, and she walked over to my truck and knocked on the passenger side window, gestured for me to roll it down. I hesitated, then complied, and she looked at me with eyes that seemed sad, seemed apologetic, and she said, "I'm sorry, Teresa. I tried to warn you, tried to give you a chance to walk away, but you came anyway, and now you're part of this whether you want to be or not." I asked her what this was, what I was delivering, why my cargo felt alive, why I'd been followed, why nothing made sense, and she said, "You're delivering people, Teresa. Or what used to be people. They're being transported to places where they'll be processed, where they'll be turned into something else, something useful, and once you've made this delivery, you'll be on the list for pickup too. You'll be assigned your own pallet, your own shrink wrap, your own truck to carry you somewhere you don't want to go." I told her that was insane, told her my cargo was industrial parts, told her I'd seen the paperwork, and she just shook her head and said, "Check your paperwork again, really read it this time." I pulled out my phone, opened the photo I'd taken of the bill of lading when I signed it, the digital copy I always kept for my records, and I looked at it closely for the first time, really examined the words instead of just skimming them. The content section didn't say industrial machinery parts, it said organic processing units, harvested and prepared, category designation human, awaiting reconstitution for secondary implementation. I read it 3 times, 4 times, the words not changing, not revealing themselves to be something else, just sitting there on my screen describing cargo that couldn't possibly be what they claimed to be describing. I looked back at the woman on the loading dock and asked her how I could stop this, how I could get out of this, how I could make this not be happening, and she said, "You can't. You took the job, you signed the paperwork, you transported the cargo, and now you're bound to it. The only question is whether you accept it voluntarily or whether they take you by force." The dark truck's doors opened and figures emerged, silhouettes that moved wrong, that bent at angles human bodies shouldn't bend, that approached my truck with slow, deliberate steps that had nothing natural about them. The woman on the loading dock said, "I'm sorry," again, and then she turned and walked back into the warehouse, the bay door closing behind her, leaving me alone in my truck with the figures getting closer and my cargo of people who weren't people anymore, radiating heat through the shrink wrap in my trailer and the certainty settling into my bones that I'd driven my last real mile on a real highway, and everything from now on would be something else. Would be destinations that didn't exist and loads that shouldn't be possible, and an endless loop of pickups and deliveries that served a purpose I didn't understand and didn't want to understand. I'm writing this on my phone, typing as fast as I can while they're still approaching, while I still have a few minutes before they reach my truck, before they open my door and explain what happens next. My name is Teresa Hammond. I'm a long-haul trucker, and I want someone to know that I existed, that I was real, that I drove real roads before I ended up on this other network, this shadow system of warehouses and cargo and destinations that overlap with the normal world but operate by different rules. If you get a dispatch call from an unknown number, if someone offers you a job that pays too well, if you're asked to pick up cargo from a warehouse you've never heard of, check the paperwork carefully before you sign it. Read every word. Make sure you understand exactly what you're agreeing to transport. And if you can't verify the job through normal channels, if the company won't confirm it through their app or their usual dispatch numbers, if something feels even slightly wrong, refuse the load, walk away, find different work. Because once you sign that digital paperwork and accept that cargo, you're not driving for shipping companies anymore. You're driving for something else. Something that uses trucks and highways and drivers to move things that shouldn't be moved. To deliver packages of people who used to have names and lives and futures before they were palletized and wrapped and loaded into trailers by workers who don't ask questions. They're at my door now. I can hear them outside. I can hear them saying my name in voices that sound like the woman from dispatch but aren't quite right, aren't quite hers, like they've copied her voice the same way they copied dispatch procedures and paperwork formats and everything else they needed to lure me into this trap. I'm going to send this message, going to post it anywhere I can think of, and then I'm going to open my door because I don't have any other choice. Because they're not going to leave. Because the only way forward is to find out what happens to drivers who deliver cargo they shouldn't have accepted. My name is Teresa Hammond, and if you're reading this, I'm probably already wrapped in black plastic on a pallet in someone else's trailer, heading to some other warehouse, some other processing center, and maybe whoever's driving that load got the same unknown dispatch call I got, and maybe they signed the same paperwork without reading it carefully, and maybe they'll end up exactly where I'm going, And maybe there are thousands of us, maybe tens of thousands, an entire network of disappeared truckers driving disappeared loads through a version of America that exists just beneath the surface of the one you think you know. Don't take the job if the number isn't in your contacts, if the dispatcher won't verify through official channels, if the warehouse address leads you somewhere that feels wrong even if you can't explain why. Just don't take the job. They're opening my door now. Some roads were never meant to be traveled more than once, and some destinations keep pulling you back no matter how far you drive away from them. My name is Ray Castellano, and I've been hauling freight for 27 years. Started when I was 22 years old, right out of high school, when my father, who was a trucker himself, taught me how to handle an 18-wheeler, how to read the road, how to respect the power of a loaded truck, and the danger of momentum and gravity. I've driven through every state in the continental U.S., logged over 3 million miles, survived ice storms and desert heat and mountain passes that made my palms sweat and my heart race. And I always thought experience was protection. Thought that time on the road translated to wisdom, to an ability to handle anything the highway could throw at me. But there's a stretch of road in Montana, a section of Route 39 between Billings and nowhere in particular, where experience doesn't matter, where all those millions of miles count for nothing, where the highway forms a loop you can't escape, no matter how many times you drive it. I first encountered it 3 years ago during a late September run, hauling a load of electronics from Seattle to Minneapolis, taking back roads to avoid some construction on the interstate that was adding hours to everyone's travel time. Route 39 appeared on my GPS as a shortcut, a 2-lane highway that cut through rural Montana, connecting small towns and ranching communities. The kind of road I'd driven 1,000 times in 1,000 different states. Nothing remarkable about it except that it would save me 45 minutes compared to staying on the main highways. The sun was setting when I turned onto Route 39, painting the Montana landscape in shades of orange and purple, the plains stretching endlessly in every direction, and there was something peaceful about it, something that made me feel alone in a good way, like I was the only person in the world, and all this empty land belonged to me for the duration of my passage through it. The first thing I noticed was the general store, small building, wooden construction that looked like it dated back to the 1950s, with a single gas pump out front and a neon sign in the window advertising cold beer and live bait. It stood by itself about 20 miles from where I'd turned onto Route 39. No other buildings visible, no town anywhere near it. Just this one structure sitting beside the highway like a marker, like a waypoint. I didn't stop, didn't need fuel or supplies, but I noticed it because it looked so isolated, so deliberately placed, and because the parking lot was completely empty even though the lights were on inside, and the open sign was illuminated. I checked my odometer, noted that I'd traveled 22 miles from the highway junction, and I kept driving into the gathering darkness, watching the road unroll ahead of me in the cone of my headlights. The next landmark was a railroad crossing, tracks running perpendicular to the highway, no signals or gates, just a warning sign and painted white lines on the pavement. I slowed down to cross it, felt the gentle bump as my truck rolled over the rails, and I glanced to my left out of habit, checking to see if any train was coming, and I saw lights in the distance, but they weren't moving, weren't approaching, just stationary points of illumination that could have been anything, could have been buildings or towers or vehicles. I drove on, the radio playing some country station I'd found, and the highway continued straight and level. No curves, no hills, no intersections, just pavement rolling through empty rangeland under a sky that was turning from purple to black as night fully descended. After about 30 minutes, I passed the general store again. Same building, same wooden construction, same neon sign, same empty parking lot, and at first I thought it was a different store that just happened to look similar. Thought maybe this part of Montana had a chain of identical rural stores because it was cheaper to replicate a design than create unique buildings. But then I noticed the same details, the same faded paint on the walls, the same hand-painted advertisement for night crawlers, the same dent in the metal siding near the door, and I knew with complete certainty that this was the exact same building I'd passed half an hour earlier. I checked my GPS, and it showed me traveling in a straight line along Route 39, showed me making progress east toward my destination, showed no indication that I'd turned around or deviated from my course. I told myself I must have been confused, must have misremembered the first building, must have gotten turned around somehow without realizing it, and I kept driving, kept my eyes on the road, kept monitoring my speed and my fuel and my GPS coordinates. 20 minutes later, I crossed the railroad tracks again. Same tracks, same warning sign, same stationary lights in the distance when I looked left. And the knot of unease in my stomach pulled tighter, grew heavier, turned into actual fear. I grabbed my CB radio and called out, asking if anyone else was on Route 39, asking if anyone had experienced anything strange on this road, but I got no response, no static, no indication that my transmission was reaching anyone. The general store appeared a third time, and this time I pulled into the parking lot, bringing my truck to a stop near the gas pump, staring at the building through my windshield and trying to understand what was happening. Trying to find a rational explanation for driving past the same landmark 3 times in 90 minutes when I'd been traveling in a straight line the entire time. I considered going inside, asking whoever worked there if they knew what was going on, if they'd seen other drivers trapped in this loop, but the building looked wrong up close, looked older than it should, looked like it was rotting from the inside, the wood warped and discolored, the windows dark, despite the neon sign claiming it was open. I sat there for 15 minutes, watching the door, watching for any sign of movement inside, and I saw nothing. No customers, no workers, no indication that anyone had been in that building for years, despite the lights being on and the sign inviting people in. I pulled back onto the highway and kept driving, and I passed the general store 7 more times that night, crossed the railroad tracks 7 more times, each iteration identical to the last, each time confirming that I was caught in some kind of spatial loop, some impossible repetition that defied physics and geography and everything I understood about how roads and travel were supposed to work. My fuel gauge barely moved even though I'd been driving for hours. My odometer continued counting miles that I wasn't actually covering, and my GPS insisted that I was making progress toward Minneapolis, even though I kept passing the same 2 landmarks over and over in a cycle that seemed to have no exit. Around what my clock claimed was 3 in the morning, I saw another truck on the road ahead of me, taillights appearing in the darkness, another 18-wheeler traveling in the same direction. I accelerated, caught up to it, pulled into the passing lane and drew even with the other truck, and I looked over at the cab to see the driver, wanting to signal to them, wanting to communicate somehow that we were both trapped, that we needed to work together to find a way out. The driver looked back at me, and I recognized my own face, older, grayer, exhausted, and terrified, staring at me from the cab of a truck that was identical to mine, pulling a trailer with the same markings, the same company logo, the same identification numbers. I was looking at myself, at a version of me that had been driving this loop longer, that had aged years or decades in this repetition, and the expression on that other face was pure despair, pure hopeless recognition of a fate I was just beginning to understand. I dropped back, let the other truck pull ahead, watched its taillights disappear into the darkness, and I felt something break inside me, some barrier of denial or disbelief that had been keeping me functional. I screamed, I sobbed, I pounded on the steering wheel, and I seriously considered just stopping the truck right there in the middle of the highway, climbing out, and walking away in any direction until I either found an exit from this place or died trying. But I didn't stop, because some part of me, the trained professional driver part, couldn't abandon a loaded truck, couldn't leave 40,000 pounds of cargo sitting unattended on a road, couldn't violate that fundamental responsibility, even in a situation that had already violated every rule of reality. I passed the general store again, and this time I saw people standing in the parking lot, figures that hadn't been there before, silhouettes that stood perfectly still and watched my truck roll past. I passed the railroad crossing again, and this time I saw something on the tracks, something large and dark and wrong in its shape, something that might have been a train car but didn't have wheels or windows or any features that made sense. Each loop was subtly different, subtly worse, introducing new elements of wrongness, new details that confirmed this place was becoming less like the real world and more like some nightmare version of it, designed specifically to trap drivers, to keep them circling forever through the same empty miles. I don't know how many times I passed the general store that night. I lost count after 50, lost my ability to track the loops, lost my sense of time completely as the night stretched into something endless, something that might have been hours or days or years. My truck never ran out of fuel, never needed maintenance, never showed any sign of wear despite the constant driving, and I realized that I was being preserved somehow, being kept functional for the sole purpose of continuing to drive, of continuing to circle through this trap. Other trucks appeared occasionally, some ahead of me, some behind, some passing in the opposite direction, even though that should have been impossible. on a 2-lane road where I was the only vehicle, and every time I saw another driver, I recognized them, recognized myself in different states of decay, different stages of acceptance, different versions of Ray Castellano, who had been caught in this loop at different times, who had been driving it for different durations, who would all continue driving it forever. The sun came up eventually, dawn breaking over the Montana plains, but it wasn't a normal sunrise, wasn't a gradual brightening. It was just sudden daylight, like someone had flipped a switch and changed the lighting of the world from night to day, without any transition. The general store looked worse in daylight, looked like it was actively decomposing, the wood rotting away, the sign flickering, the whole structure sagging under its own weight. The railroad crossing looked wrong too, the rails twisted and bent. The warning sign displaying symbols instead of words, shapes I didn't recognize and couldn't interpret. And the road itself had changed, the pavement cracked and broken, weeds growing through the surface, white lines faded to almost nothing, looking like it hadn't been maintained in decades even though it had been perfect the night before. I drove through the daylight loop, past the landmarks 20 more times, 30, and with each passage they deteriorated further, became more distorted, became less like real places and more like crude copies made by something that didn't quite understand what a general store or a railroad crossing was supposed to look like. The other trucks I saw were changing too, becoming less detailed, losing features, turning into basic shapes that suggested vehicles, but weren't quite right. And I understood that I was watching the loop itself decay, watching this prison of repetition collapse in on itself, and I didn't know if that meant I would be released or if I would just collapse along with it, dissolve into basic shapes and lose everything that made me Ray Castellano. Then I saw the exit. Not a real exit, not a properly marked off-ramp, just a gap in the landscape, a place where the highway seemed to open up onto a different road, a side route that hadn't existed in any of the previous loops. I took it without thinking, yanked my steering wheel to the right, felt my truck lurch as I left the pavement of Route 39, and I was suddenly driving on gravel, bouncing over a rough surface, heading away from the loop, toward something that looked like actual civilization, actual towns with lights and buildings and signs of human presence. I drove for 10 minutes, 15, 20, the gravel road eventually connecting to a paved highway that my GPS recognized, that had a proper route number and normal mile markers, and I let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob, because I thought I'd escaped, thought I'd found my way out, thought the nightmare was over. But 3 months later, I was driving through Nevada on a completely different job, hauling a completely different load, traveling on completely different highways, and I passed a general store that looked exactly like the one on Route 39. Just for a second, just in my peripheral vision, it was there beside the road in a location where my GPS showed nothing, where there shouldn't have been any buildings. And then I blinked, and it was gone, replaced by normal desert landscape, normal empty Nevada terrain. I've seen it 6 more times since then, always just for a moment, always at the edge of my vision, that same wooden structure with the same neon sign. And I've seen the railroad crossing too, seen it appear in places where there are no tracks, seen it flicker into existence on highways in Washington and Texas and Pennsylvania, always just for a second, always just long enough for me to recognize it before it vanishes. I think I'm still in the loop. I think I never actually left Route 39, never actually found that exit, never actually escaped onto normal roads. I think everything I've experienced since that night in Montana has been the loop expanding, has been the trap growing larger to encompass more highways, more states, more of the road network, turning all of America into one endless circle with me driving through it forever. The landmarks appear more frequently now, the general store and the railroad crossing showing up multiple times per week, and I've started seeing other things too, other markers that I don't remember from the original loop, but which feel familiar anyway. A broken-down farmhouse, a billboard advertising nothing, a bridge over a dry riverbed, each one another waypoint in a circuit that's becoming denser, more complex, more inescapable. I've also started seeing my other selves more often, other versions of me driving other trucks on other roads, and some of them are ahead of where I am, further along in the transformation, further decayed, further removed from the person I used to be before I turned onto Route 39 that September evening 3 years ago. One of them stopped me last week at a rest area in Ohio, pulled his truck up next to mine, and he looked at me through his window with eyes that were too old, too tired, too full of knowledge about things I don't want to know yet. And he said, "Stop fighting it, Ray. Stop looking for exits. There aren't any. There's just the road, just the loop. just the driving. And the sooner you accept that, the less it hurts. He pulled away before I could respond, merged back onto the highway, and disappeared into traffic that swallowed him completely. And I sat there in the parking lot for an hour trying not to believe him, trying not to accept that my life had become an eternal repetition with no destination and no end. My name is Ray Castellano. I'm 52 years old. I've been a truck driver for 27 years, and I think I've been dead for 3 of those years. Think I've been a ghost, driving ghost highways through a ghost version of America that overlaps with the real one, just enough to be confusing, just enough to make me think I still have choices, when really I'm just following a predetermined path that loops back to Route 39, no matter which direction I steer. I still talk to my wife on the phone, still call her every few days to tell her I'm okay, still hear her voice asking when I'm coming home. But I don't think she's real anymore either. I think she's part of the loop too, part of the simulation or the trap or whatever this is. And one day I'll drive past a general store in some empty part of some forgotten state, and I'll see her standing in the parking lot with all the other silhouettes, all the other people who got caught in loops of their own, and I'll finally understand that there's no home to return to, because home was just another landmark on a circuit I've been traveling forever. If you're a trucker reading this, if you drive long-haul routes through remote areas, pay attention to the landmarks you pass. Make sure they're not repeating. Make sure you're not seeing the same buildings twice, because that's how it starts. That's the first sign that you've turned onto a road you shouldn't have taken. And if you do find yourself in a loop, if you pass the same place twice when you know you've been driving straight, don't look for exits. Don't take side roads. Don't try to escape, because the loop doesn't want you to escape. It wants you to drive forever, and the more you struggle, the tighter it wraps around you until your entire existence becomes nothing but pavement and mile markers and the growing certainty that you've been doing this for so much longer than you remember. I'm driving right now as I'm typing this on my phone, using voice to text because I can't take my eyes off the road, can't risk missing something important, can't stop watching for the general store or the railroad crossing or any of the other landmarks that mean I'm still trapped in the same circuit I've been traveling since that night in Montana. My GPS says I'm in Kansas, says I'm heading east on I-70, says I'm 200 miles from my next delivery, but I don't trust it anymore. Don't trust any of my instruments. Don't trust the highway signs or the mile markers or the other vehicles I see, because any of them could be part of the loop, could be false indicators designed to make me think I'm making progress, when really I'm just circling, just spiraling, just driving deeper into a trap that has no center and no edge, just infinite repetition pretending to be forward motion. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that look exactly like the sky looked that first evening on Route 39, and I can see a building ahead, a small structure beside the highway, and I know before I get close enough to make out details that it's going to be the general store, going to be that same wooden building with the same neon sign, and this time maybe I'll stop, maybe I'll go inside. Maybe I'll meet whatever is in there that's been waiting for me to finally give up and accept my place in this endless circuit. Or maybe I'll just drive past it again like I've driven past it 1,000 times before, and I'll keep driving through the night and into the morning and through another day and another night in a sequence that never stops, because stopping would mean confronting the truth that I died 3 years ago on a stretch of Montana highway, and everything since then has been the last firing of neurons in a brain that's convinced itself it's still alive, still traveling, still working toward destinations it will never reach. My name is Ray Castellano, and I'm still driving, and I'll always be still driving, and somewhere on a road I'll never find. There's a version of me who never turned onto Route 39, who took the main highways, who arrived at his delivery on time and went home to his wife and his life. But I'm not that version. I'm this one. I'm the one who made the wrong turn and got trapped in the loop and became just another ghost truck on America's infinite highway, circling forever through identical miles that lead nowhere at all. There's the general store now, appearing in my headlights exactly where I knew it would be. I'm not stopping this time either. That concludes tonight's True Trucker Horror Stories. If you enjoyed the ride into the unknown, hit that like button, subscribe for more late-night dread, and share your own road encounters in the comments below. Until the next haul, so keep your lights bright, your radio on, and your eyes on the mile markers. This is Dark Hours. Signing off, But the road never really ends.